Hey everybody, I am extremely excited for today's conversation as we gear up for the fall virtual conference presented by Beer 30 by the Fifth Ingredient Pneumatic Scale Angelus and Pro Brew Supply. It's going to be October 18th, 19th, and 20th live here in CBP. Watch it on Facebook, watch it on YouTube, dive into it after the conference. 3 straight days of 50 plus presenters, 100% free. And I'm really excited for today because sometimes when we have these conference preview panels, we take a focus, whether it's brewing, whether it's marketing, whether it's finance. But I feel this is almost the most random panel I've ever assembled. But when you look at all of us today, it's almost the team you need to have success from the beginning days of first launching your brewery to making it long time in the industry. So I'm really excited to have everybody here today. Really excited to see where the conversation goes. And Morgan, because you are to the right of me, tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Andrew. I am Morgan, and I'm the owner of Content on Draft. My company specializes in helping craft breweries convert their social media followers into taproom customers. Rather than really take over your social media accounts, we focus on training and helping you have the skills and creating the strategy to have sustainable success. We have worked with breweries across the country, and locally I'm here in Buffalo, New York, and work with some awesome people here too.
I had the opportunity to meet a bunch of great New York State Brewers Association people actually out at Denver, where I met almost everybody here. So I look forward to sharing a beer with you someday, Morgan. I know we've been chatting for a while, and that's going to be a good time.
Eric and I were actually talking, Eric Coleman and I were talking about that at the New York State Craft Brewers.
Eric and Jason and I, we shared a lift together a few Saturdays ago.
You guys had a good time.
It was a good time. I think Eric treated us to the fanciest lift he could find. Was it an Escalade or something similar like that? He went fancy.
Awesome.
Well, we've got two Jasons today, but Jason with Vombuds. I'm going to let you give that intro next.
Gotcha. Well, thanks for having me, Andrew. I think it's the second or third time I've been on with you on this. I'm not quite sure. But I'm Jason Gladfelter. I'm owner of Vombuds LLC, which is an employee complaint program that helps businesses, small businesses, clarify, understand, and address and guide internal complaints. Since most small businesses don't have an HR department, they need to either do it themselves, which they don't have the time usually or the resources, or they use an external resource. And I know there's some external HR companies out there. This is not quite HR. This is more about dealing with the complaints in a confidential and safe space for the small businesses. And breweries fit that bill.
Yeah. Why have you chosen to focus on the craft beer industry?
I'm a total beer geek. I was director of the Brewery Mediation Network for several years, 9 years or so, at another company, and COVID really turned that company kind of upside down since we were more in person. Vombuds is virtual ombuds. See the V, you got it. So nobody knows that, but I wanted to concentrate more on the small businesses and brewing industry. From the Brewery Mediation Network, and this was a way to do it. And kind of through my years of doing some mediations with breweries through trademarks and neighbors and all this stuff, kind of the most interesting and complicated and popular issues were internal and the internal dynamics for just any small business, really. So that's how I got here.
Well, excited to have your insight today.
Thank you.
Jason Sleeman with United Community Bank. For everyone who hasn't met you virtually or in person, who are you?
Yeah, so Jason Sleeman with United Community Bank. I finance breweries. And so whether that's a startup or an expansion, I provide money. And so I always tell people the difference in talking to me and another banker is you don't have to tell me what the volume of a barrel is. And so I know a lot more about the industry and can help. So excited to be here and add what I can.
At what point in your career, Jason, did you decide to focus on craft beer, just like other Jason?
Yeah, so I've been in banking for almost 20 years. You're seeing that with a receding hairline, and the last 9 years, I've really been focused on craft breweries. So I've got some now that are rolling anniversary after anniversary, and it's kind of fun to see where they started in their infancies, and now standing up really big tanks with really big brew houses because they're in demand. So it's fun to watch. That's something that you don't get in the normal banking world, to get to watch kind of something grow like the craft beverage industry does.
No, I always love having you in the conversation. You bring great insight. Kyle Rheiner, it was a pleasure to meet you a few weeks ago as well. So obviously craft brewing insurance is your thing, but why craft beer and what do you do?
So what I do is provide peace of mind and protection to craft beverage manufacturers by way of insurance. And I've also created a craft beverage business library and podcast form called the Beer Mighty Things podcast to, again, spread that value, give away that value for free, interview folks, and just educate. So I got into the beer industry. I used to work at a brewery back in 2005, 2006 when I was back in college. I spent some 7 years in the financial services industry, realized I just wasn't passionate about it, wanted to do something similar, became an independent insurance agent, and now a certified insurance counselor. And kind of after 2 years of banging my head against the wall, saying like, what the hell am I going to do? I saw kind of the writing on the wall as far as where the craft beverage industry was going. I had the background in beer and hospitality. I was passionate about it. We were really good at insuring manufacturers, which these folks are. And I just ran with it. Now I work with over 120 breweries and distilleries, meaderies, cideries in the country.
Wow. And how many different brewery owners or distillery owners you get to interact with each day?
At 15, 20.
You're probably like me. You spend all your days on Zoom. How do you get any work done?
Zoom. I have a great team. I have a great team who's watching right now. So, cheers to you. But we have a great office, great support staff. I couldn't do it without them.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today. In PK, Pulkit, always a pleasure to interact with you, whether in person or virtually. It's been fun watching the growth of your company, Beer 30 by the Fifth Ingredient over the past few years. But for everyone who's not familiar, what do you do in the world of craft beer?
Yeah, so my name is Pulkit Agrawal. I also go by PK. I am the founder and CEO of the Fifth Ingredient. We develop a brewery data management software system. It's called Beer 30, and it basically helps breweries track their data from grain to glass and actually start using their data to brew better beer and brew more beer. One of the thought process that we had is that so many people just have paper logs, spreadsheets, and whiteboards, and they're used to taking the data down during brew day, during sales, etc., but they don't actually do anything with that information. And so Beer 30 is all about having an all-in-one system to focus on the raw material side of things where you're making those purchases to the actual recipe, brew day, fermentation, packaging, all the way up to sales and distribution, and then integration with accounting platforms like Xero and QuickBooks Online. And so it's basically the full supply chain that we're tracking and helping people use their data to get better insights on how they can actually improve their overall processes.
Awesome. Well, I always appreciate your friendship and I appreciate your support and Fifth Ingredient support of craft beer professionals, but I have two follow-ups for you. You go by PK. You have it spelled out as PKA. Why not just PK?
That's a great question. So first name is Pulkit, middle initial is K, and last name is Agrawal. So in my emails, I always go by PKA, and then PK just became a nice little abbreviation when we entered Australia, because a lot of people could not pronounce Pulkit properly. And so PK started. But in college, I did go by PKA, and then it kind of just transitioned to PK.
People would actually call you PKA?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Whatever.
Yeah, A's for Australia, he said. So now
there you go.
Yeah, that gets you a little more business down under.
Yeah, Australia is actually one of our really good market share. We have about 12% of breweries out in Australia right now, which is awesome, and just focused on growing that number out.
So that's a really good question. Why has Australia been so receptive to what you're doing?
I think it's twofold, actually. So one is we have a really awesome brand ambassador out there. His name is Steve Hendo Henderson. He's actually given a number of craft beer professional talks as well. And so he approached us a few years ago because he was running his own consulting company. And as part of his consulting company, he basically had his clients using his smart sheets and spreadsheets and paper logs and trying to aggregate all that information. And so he found Beer 30 through one of the online forums, and we just hit it off. And he made some introductions to clients. And so that kind of started this whole like wildfire of word of mouth in Australia. And one of the other cool things I would say is that the Australia craft beer scene is just at its boom phase right now, kind of like where the US craft beer scene was maybe 5 to 10 years ago. And so it's really cool to be on that cusp associated with it, and having somebody that's well recognized like Hendo on our team really helps out with getting the word out there. And just, it's a wildfire. It travels by word of mouth, and just more people hear about us, see the impact day to day, and it just keeps growing.
No, that's fantastic. And so for everyone here, you all provide some sort of value or product to the craft beer industry. So I'd love to hear from each of you, why do you feel the service or product you provide right now is extremely important in the current state of craft beer? And because PK, you're already chatting right now, why is this value you provide through Beer 30 even more important now in the current state of things?
So I think we're at a point right now where there are so many breweries out there in the market that there's basically a twofold aspect when it comes to running a business, right? One is making really good quality beer, where if I go to your brewery as a consumer and I end up having a bad experience on the beer side of things, I can just as easily go right down the street, quite literally in most places, and just hit up a new brewery, right? So the quality aspect becomes very important, which is where the brew better beer comes from. And the other aspect is costs, where at this point, and especially with, the way that people are fluctuating, people are getting back into a lot of cans as we saw during COVID and stepping away from keg sales and things, that the cost aspect is super important, and to have a really great visible insight as to the entire cost for the supply chain, right? If you know that a 24 pack of cans is $15 cost, then you know exactly what you're going to mark that up for retail. And so being able to break costs down to understand everything from ingredients, packaging, supplies, labor, etc., and get the full picture is super important. And so that's where I think Beer 30 helps the breweries out in the current day to really help them focus on the quality and focus on the cost aspect of things.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Let's kind of keep the finance train going because you talked a little bit about cost. Jason Sleeman over there, what are you currently seeing in the craft beer world? You're a lender. Are people talking to you these days? Are they interested in growing? Are they interested in opening up breweries? Why is the banking aspect of the industry right now something that people should be watching?
It's a really weird time for banking, right? Because I think there's a little bit of a false sense of security with a lot of balance sheets being pretty flush with cash, just because of different sources. There's not a lot of non-traditional sources of revenue that have come in through COVID, and so a lot of breweries kind of have inflated balance sheets. I've had some breweries come to me across different conversations say, hey, you wouldn't probably have lent me some of this money that I've gotten for free or through grants or things like that. And so there's a lot of breweries that are kind of growing their footprint or their equipment through non-traditional financing right now, right? But I think that will change. And I think it will change very quickly. Not related to breweries, but I did read an article yesterday where they were talking about at the very beginning of the pandemic, credit cards were at like the lowest balance that they have ever been, and people were doing well. And then all the stimulus stopped and all that kind of stuff. And now we're at a record high for credit cards. And they were talking about that. And so I think over the next 12 to 18 months, there's going to be a lot of advice that's going to be needed, and breweries are not going to be able to grow, without being able to be very smart with their balance sheet and also with the finance they use. There's a lot of finance options. Some of those are better than others. Some are expensive. Some of them are double digits, and some are really low single digits. And so being able to just kind of talk to people and help point them in the right direction says, hey, can you do this, or can you modify something here to try and get yourself in a better position? That's clearly what I'm going to be talking about later. In the CBP fall conference is being able to prepare for that, because you don't want to have growth and demand, and the only place to be able to finance that's going to be at 13 or 14%, like everyone's doing other credit cards now. So for me, a lot of the conversations right now, we're not probably having as many conversations as I like, just because people are flush with cash. But I have a feeling that it's going to swing very quickly. The pendulum's going to swing very quickly the other direction at the beginning of 2022.
It'll be very fascinating to monitor. Looking forward to hearing your insight with Audrey Gaizunas at the conference coming up. So excited to have you as always. Now, Morgan, once they get their money from Jason, they have their brewery up and running. The past year and a half, we have all engaged so much virtually. How has the role of social media in a brewery's, success changed over the past 18 months?
Sure. So I would say there were a lot of breweries that really could rely on that everyday foot traffic that just came in naturally. And a lot of that stopped during the pandemic and then really went to a halt when places started shutting down. And people had to rely more on their online community, on to-go sales, on all these different ways of streams of revenue. And a lot of breweries did a great job of building a community online. And people still crave that connection online, and it starts online. And it's so important to continue having those conversations, even though we can be in person. It's still about getting people in the door. And a lot of people are a little more hesitant about where they're going and how many places they're going to. Places have limited hours if they're short staffed. So people are looking to social media to see, okay, here's what's going on. Here's when this place is open. And if you want to reach those people, a large majority of them are starting on Facebook, Instagram, other social media platforms.
And Morgan, you're so great at coming up with titles for your talks at the virtual conferences that typically have numbers in them. 5 tips to do XYZ, 7 strategies for this, 10 things you need to be looking out for. But if I had to ask you, like as a consumer, if you saw a brewery post one picture on Facebook that were to draw you in, what type of picture do you see that has like the most engagement and kind of encourages, the casual person online to want to visit that brewery?
I want to see a person, your atmosphere, and a community-driven caption versus a sales pitch.
Is there any brewery right now that you believe doing a fantastic job of putting out that content? Feel free to think on it and come back to it in a little bit.
No, I mean, I have answers. I've always felt this way about Community Beer Works. That's a local brewery in my community, so I feel a little allegiance to them. But it's in their name, community. And they have a Facebook group that's like Friends of Community Beer Works. And their social media manager, Mike West, does an awesome job, like getting you invested in what they're doing. Like if I miss an event there, I'm like, ooh, I missed something good. And it's where I look first for stuff. So I would say he's doing an awesome job.
And you said they have their own Facebook group as well?
Yeah.
So you have your own Facebook group. I obviously have a Facebook group. PK, you have a Facebook group. Not to kind of leave Kyle and Jason out there for a second, but we'll come back to you, I promise. What has been the value of creating your own Facebook groups for your businesses been like over the past, few years since you created your companies?
I mean, I hate to say it, but having the Facebook group is more valuable for my business than my Facebook page is. I think it's still important as a landing spot. That's where we get a lot of leads in terms of clients, but I build more community in the Facebook group Customers on Draft because it really opens the conversation. It has the people versus pages interacting with me. So for my community, that's where I see the value. And I think some breweries are able to do that really well. And it's just you're interacting with people versus the name of the brewery as much. And people seem to be more open and receptive. So I think it can be a really great tool for a lot of craft beverage businesses across the board.
And I think we're all craving that human interaction. PK, how about you? What's your insight on that?
Yeah, so it was about a few months ago that we created the Beer 30 Legends community. And so we just really dived in on the whole fact that all of our customers are legends. And it became a very amazing platform to communicate product updates to our customers, but also to really gauge their interest as to what type of updates they want to see in the platform moving forwards. The 3 pillars that we're using at the 5th ingredient really are data, community, and tools. And Beer 30, as an example, is just a tool that people can use, but community and using the data as aspects that tie in with the pillars of our company. And so the community has just been a really good way for people to reach out about customer requests, reach about issues that they're having with the system, any updates that they'd like to see, some more training. And so we also use WhatsApp with each of our breweries as a one-on-one communication between our team, and especially because it creates a nice little one-on-one communication aspect. But the community just ends up being a very nice way for people to chat with one another and for people to realize hey, I'm not the only person in my area using Beer 30. And we've actually had people that have used that community to connect with one another and actually get into a point of meeting up for beers and going through Beer 30 things in person. And so it's been a really cool aspect to just see people just driving the engagement in that entire Beer 30 Legends Facebook group.
Does running the Facebook group ever get overwhelming at times? Or sometimes you mentioned everybody has their own WhatsApp. Do you feel like you have a constant stream of messages you're responsible for replying to?
WhatsApp, absolutely. Similar to Kyle, luckily we have a good team that's been out there now and that's been dealing with a lot of this. So it's been great to see that growth happen. But in terms of the Facebook group, it's by no means like your job, Andrew, with CBP. I think we can all agree on that one. And it's, just something that's happening in the background. Check it out, throughout the day a couple times. But WhatsApp becomes our main source of communication, where we offer 24/7 customer support, and our average wait times are, usually within a couple minutes to an hour tops on responses. So it's kind of a good way to keep building that out.
No, I love that. And community, I believe, is important to all of us. And in the craft beer space right now, community has lots of different meetings. We're always trying to make our communities look more like the actual community around the brewery. And the craft beer space right now, there's a lot going on to create more welcoming and safer spaces. And Kyle, you were in a podcast or an episode with us a while back of, how we can do that. And it's interesting for me because Craft Brewing Insurance is your company. Why is creating safer spaces in our industry important to you?
Well, I think because we want to keep these breweries and these businesses around. We want to empower the workers, right? We want the beverage industry to be a place where we can be proud of where we work. We can have the opportunity for advancement and create a living within our community. And that stuff just goes a long way, right? You want to be able to work at a place where you enjoy, and you want to feel confident that management's going to be doing the right thing, no matter what your job is, right? So that is why it's imperative to adapt and adjust, to put processes in place to create that safe workspace. Because again, you want to come to a place where you trust the decisions that are going to be made are the right ones. Or at least have a platform to say, hey, let's discuss what's going on here as a team and collectively come up with some sort of solution. So.
And has your position changed over the years with the amount of time you spend helping, breweries and other businesses work on creating that culture to facilitate those safe spaces?
I do my best to provide value, and that's why, it's really hard to speak to 120, beverage manufacturers every day or every week. So that was why the podcast kind of came about, was there's so much content out there and there's so much value. And a lot of times, while I'm following up with people, I leave a voicemail, and they're busy and they're not getting the voicemail or they're not returning the call just because, again, they're running a business versus, spending time on the phone with the risk manager. And so what I've been able to do with the podcast, whether it's, somebody who's in startup phase or somebody who is in year 5 or 7, I can say, hey, I recorded this podcast. Sit down with your team. It's 45 minutes to an hour. Listen to this episode. Maybe you can take some tidbits away that you guys can talk about in your next safety meeting or your next, diversity and inclusion meeting. And here's some things that you guys can instill. So the podcast has given me that opportunity to have something that, again, it's a creative, it's a business library for the craft beverage business. And it's nice to kind of have those available to say, hey, listen to this episode, or here's one on OSHA. I did a 4-part on OSHA. Here's safe housekeeping and just some things to keep in mind. But this way, it's like I can give it to you and you don't have to listen to it now. It'll be there later if you want to listen to it Saturday while you're cutting your grass. Like, it's there. So I wanted to make something that was available. It's in your ears as you drink beers or make beers. So that was the point, right? Not often are the brewery owners or the brewers sitting in front of YouTube or in front of their computer, right? They're moving around. So I wanted to make sure it was in their ears and it was portable.
In their ears as they drink beers. You're so clever, Kyle.
And I'm left-handed, sorry.
I love the content that you're putting out, and the fact that you framed it as a resource, I think is extremely valuable because, like you mentioned, and all of us know this, brewery owners wear so many different hats. They're so busy. They don't always have time to tune in live. So I'm thankful for all of you to hang out live, but not everybody can dedicate certain moments to taking the content. So having it available forever is the true value, and I think you've created something really special there. Now, Jason, on my top right now, we're talking about community, how to create safer workspaces. You've been in the industry with brewery mediation prior to this. Why is this something, one, that's always been important to you, but why is it arguably more important now?
No. So are you talking about the community?
creating more welcoming spaces.
Welcoming spaces, yeah. No, so for about 10 years or so, I've been almost yelling at the industry about the internal dynamics of workspaces. And finally, at this CBC, there were a couple of seminars about either DEI or inclusion in the workspace, and I was frustrated because I've been submitting applications for years, and they finally got one. So I was relieved that they're finally taking a look at this at the industry 30,000 feet level. But I think when I first got into craft beer back in college in 90 something, it was in Lawrence, Kansas, and I went to Free State Brewing, and you can have a beer sitting next to the very liberal side of town, and then the very conservative side of town on the same bar, and it was great. And they talked about the same things or different things, but they talked, and they were engaged and welcoming. And I think that's when it hit me that the brew house is kind of one of the only places where you can get that diversity. And I think over the years I think the internet and kind of the social media has separated people out. But the brew house is still there. And I think getting people inside there, having a beer, everybody likes beer. I'll say everybody, but everybody should like beer. I'll put it that way. And then they could all talk and have a good time, or at least share the space. And that's fine too. I think that has been lost a lot through the internet and through the political and social changes, and getting that back is going to be tough. I think it's still possible. I think the skill sets aren't quite there, and I think there are a lot of details that are lost, and some of the training seminars I've listened to or attended for HR or about DEI are great. They're needed. What they're missing is navigation. They direct you into doing certain things. This is what you do when this happens, and this is what you do when that. And my kind of red flag was, okay, how do you do that? How do you talk to someone who is emotional, who has a lot of issues, who you've been unfair to? Do they even want to talk to you? How do you bring up uncomfortable conversations? How do you start them? How do you finish them? And I think that's the danger point. If we gloss over that and someone does try to do those conversations and they mess it up, things get worse. And not only does that hurt the community aspect, but also financially, it'll hurt your business. And that's where I think when we see those trainings, those are needed. They're not the end all be all, and I don't think they should be.
A really great insight there, Jason. And the next topic I would like to bring up today, and this is something we talked about in our first conference preview session we had last week, is the theme of collaboration versus competition. 10 years ago when a brewery first opened, you were one of just a few in your area. All the brewery owners knew one another. They were sharing yeast. They were helping each other out. There was a lot of collaboration. In the current state of things, 9,000 plus breweries, the question is, does competition take over from collaboration? Are we still seeing that collaborative nature we once saw in craft beer? I love to hear everybody's insight on, where the industry stands. And just something to throw out there, the pandemic, as Morgan mentions, made everybody's decision-making process a little bit more intentional. And every brewery is kind of looking out for number one right now. They want to make sure they're surviving this pandemic. So has that contributed to the competition we see in the current state of the industry? Or do you think that collaboration aspect is still there and just going to keep, getting better as we get through all this? Anybody have any thoughts on that? Go ahead, Jason.
Well, so my background is in conflict management. So when I hear collaboration, my eyes light up. I tend to think of the collaboration in the brewing industry as cooperation rather than collaboration. Is a small difference, but it's important. I think in the competition, they're all competitors. We all are in some aspect.
Jason, I'm going to have to ask you to back up for a second. You're going to have to define those words for me. Collaboration versus cooperation. How would you?
Well, I think cooperation is you help someone with a task that they need help with, and collaboration is there's a problem that you both need to solve. You need to work together to solve that problem. And I think there's a lot of cooperation. There's the collaboration versus litigation beer by Avery and oh God, was it Russian River? Years ago, I loved that beer because there was a problem and they collaborated to solve it. And I think collaboration has been used a little bit too much. I'm not going to discourage the use of it, because cooperation or collaboration, whatever, is great. So go ahead. I think lately there at least on the consumer side, there has been a fight for identity as to what brands you like, and that kind of increases the competition, or not even the beers, but the styles. If it's IPAs or stouts or sours or whatever it is, and then if you go online and you see some of the forums, and they're IPAs are blah blah blah, and sours they're just bad beer and all this stuff, and I think that kind of spills over a little bit into the market. So I when it comes to competition for the breweries, yeah, there's going to be more just because there's more breweries, especially in the density of the markets. But I'm in Denver or Lakewood, Colorado, so there's a lot of breweries out here, and the population is increasing, but it's not increasing enough to sustain a lot of those breweries. So some have closed for various reasons, and I don't think the competition is getting more is increasing, and I don't think collaboration is going down. I think the resources for breweries have increased, and therefore the reliance on each other on that cooperation or collaboration is kind of not needed. Does that make sense? I kind of went off there for a sec.
Appreciate that. Jason Sleeman, you're up.
Yeah, so I can share some insight on that. And, today is National Drink Beer Day. And I'm not sure who answered this survey, but evidently the number one beer in America right now, or America's preferred beer, is Budweiser. Not anyone on this panel would say that, but that's evidently what they said. And so I thought it was interesting, you talk about collaboration, and I think I have a different view of this, partly because I'm seeing collaborations, but not necessarily the same. Two brewers go together, they brew a beer together, and they release a beer, right? So, Andrew, you met Christopher Glenn with Bottle Share. He's got this roadshow of collaborations that are happening, and all of those go back to support people who have fallen on hard times within the brewing industry, right? And so he's going and he's just moving from brewery to brewery to brewery, and they're releasing different volumes of Bottle Share releases, right? So they're associated with a brewery, they're associated with a nonprofit. The profit comes away, and it goes back and gets poured back into the industry. So you're seeing those type of collaborations, but also, I watched a big brewery here in Atlanta have kind of what I would consider a collaboration. They had a big release for one of their beers, and they invited a bunch of other breweries to come and be part of that festivity. And so they had 50 beers on site, 50 breweries on site at their premises. So it wasn't like a festival that the city or someone was putting on. They put on their own mini festival, and it was not like the cheap beer. These were super geeky, bottled, barrel-aged, kind of really, really good beers. And so I think you're seeing a lot of collaboration that are happening, but they don't always take that traditional two breweries coming together, brew a beer, and they release it, right? You're seeing a lot more innovation in the way these collaborations are coming about and in what they look like. They may look like 50 beers being released at a festival, or they may be looking like investing back in the industry for the better good of everybody. And that's a lot of the collaborations we're seeing now in the industry.
That event, it was at Pontoon Brewing. Is that correct?
It was at Pontoon
Brewing. It looked
Brewing.
like a fantastic event. It looked like a lot of brewers were there. I mean, a highly networking event as well.
Yeah.
As that. While I'm sure the beers were fantastic, great opportunity to meet people in the industry. They
were, and it wasn't like unknown beers. They were very well-known brands, and they weren't just in the Southeast. They were from all over, and so it was a great event, and everyone was happy to be there. And there was a lot of sharing, collaborating, and people sharing beers and doing that kind of stuff. It was just a really cool environment. And the beneficiary of all that was the consumer, because there were beers that you would not have been able to get a hold of had you not been to that event. And so those are I think, as you continue to have what do we look like from a community standpoint, if you can put a lot more of those, you'll kind of see the consumer win, because they're getting to try stuff that they wouldn't normally get to try, and meet brands they normally wouldn't get to meet.
Yeah, I think we definitely have to look outside the box for innovative ideas we can work together. So I love to hear, Morgan, I'm love to hear your feedback on this one, because you talked about how the breweries are kind of fighting for share of mind. Do you believe that we're more competitive right now than we had been a few years ago? Or talk a little bit about where you feel we stand versus collaboration, cooperation, competition.
All the C's.
All the C's.
So I wouldn't say more or less. I would just say it's changed. Like, to me, the definition of what a collaboration was more limited before. Like, it was, as Jason was describing, like two breweries coming together, brewing a beer together. Now it's expanded to really include, okay, what other types of businesses can we work with? One of the clients I work with in Fort Worth has like a collaboration with a cake company, and they do like dessert pairings, and they feed off each other's audiences to really bring in more people. I've been to events that are bringing in vendors like at breweries that they really never did those kind of vendor events before, and just seeing new ways you can work together. And I would say there's a more open conversation that I'm seeing in my Facebook group, where people want to share their ideas with each other. Like, one of the posts that comes to mind is one of the members posted about their merchandise display, and it kind of started a conversation of like, what does yours look like? How do you go about creating this? And everyone was kind of learning from each other. And there wasn't this like, I'm going to keep all my ideas to myself and never share them with anyone. And I would say the competition is like, yeah, of course you're competing for that consumer, but the majority of the breweries I'm talking to are competing against the dive bar, or with cheap beer, or the Budweisers. Like, they're not necessarily competing with one another. I feel like a lot of them are building each other up, but the price point can be discouraging for some people. And so I think that that's where the competition collaboration has kind of shifted.
And Morgan, you mentioned how in your community that tapper managers, social media people, whoever's in your community was sharing information on one topic and just freely open up a conversation with others across the country. Do you believe people in the industry are more apt to share, let's call them secrets, with people outside their area versus their neighbors?
Yeah, I would say so. I think that they're not looking at each other as competitors, but I would even say, like, I mean, there's people locally in the group that I know that weren't as receptive to sharing that, who within the past year, their mindset has changed and they're working together more. And I don't feel that there's that like hesitancy there as much anymore.
Yeah, I think your observation about how just the environment has changed is very, very true.
Because they don't want, like, it was really like, you don't want your local brewery, like your other local breweries and friends. A lot of these people have worked in different breweries together. You shift, you don't want to see them gone either. Like, it became more about, okay, what can we do locally? Like, I've seen just here in Buffalo, like the building up of like the Western New York Brewers Guild again, and like just like, how can we all get through this together, come outside of it, and shift more people away from not local options.
And I think all of you do a great job of doing this. You all have a product or service that you're passionate about, using to help breweries, but you're even more passionate about providing value any way you can, whether it's just having a conversation, sharing your unique insight, putting out a podcast as many times as you do, Kyle, that talks on so many different topics, outside of your typical expertise. I think that's the best way to help give back right now.
From a lot of the things that you read or other podcasts you listen to, there's so much to be said for giving away content for free. Don't have that scarcity mindset, whereas like I have to keep this in, right? You're better off sharing it. So that's the whole driver behind that. Let's give that content out for free, and again, make it accessible forever. As far as the collaboration and competition, I see, there's the breweries are still collaborating. They're brewing beer together. But what we're also seeing now is I think it was to Morgan's point, is that a lot of these breweries are now collaborating with other types of business. Whether it's ice cream, whether it's dogfish and sneakers, or there's I was just talking to John Hall about the Adidas sneakers that came out for Oktoberfest, and there were pretzels on the laces. Different ways to get creative and find a new audience. Breweries collaborating with, say, like the outdoor sports type companies. So find who likes beer, and then kind of create those avenues and go find some additional beer drinkers, or introduce people to beer that they didn't know existed.
I think a theme we're hearing is innovation and looking outside of the craft beer industry. Julia Hers today posted on her LinkedIn. I think Deschutes also did a sneakers collaboration. So
nice.
Nike, if you're watching today, that CBP shoe, we're ready to do it right now. Reach out.
Let's get it.
Yeah. So PK, how about you? Because you're interacting with a lot of brewers and brewery owners. So
yeah, definitely brewery owners. And I think even just taking a step back. So I actually started off in the beer industry from undergrad, being recruited to work at Ballast Point Brewing in San Diego as an engineer. Right. And so I come from the world of beer, mainly on the packaging side and packaging lines. And what was super interesting, and so we're talking about 2015 here, the very first week, my boss said, hey, I want you to go over to Stone, which was Ballast Point's biggest competitor in San Diego. And I want you to go to Stone. I'm going to set up some meetings for you and my other process engineer partner to go and check out Stone and check out their brew house, check out their packaging lines. And I was just shocked, because everything you hear about is competition. And yet from the very first week, it was, no, we have some contacts at Stone, go check with them. And when Ballast Point launched their entire nitrogen beer brand, we had some friends that had done bottling and nitrogen before that I was doing some R&D conversations with. So I've always felt that the industry as a whole has been all about collaboration and really focused on what can we do to keep lifting each other up and basically elevating the entire industry. And so I think that was a theme when I first started in 2015. And I think going on the other end as a supplier and working with breweries, I think a case in point aspect is really the number of referrals that we get from people that want others to use Beer 30, right? Like they could just as easily not tell people what software system they're using, but I've gotten a number of warm leads that come through people saying, hey, I heard about you from Brewery X that's using you, loves it. And that's a case in point example where if you were very cutthroat with each other, you would keep it very secret, like, oh, this is the software system that I'm using. But people are so happy to do referrals. And I've actually had a number of customers that are like, hey, we're both using Beer 30, two different breweries that are doing a collab. And they're like, is there a way that the data sets can talk to one another? Because we're both like your customers and things. So it's very cool to even see that aspect of things just dive in together, because I think, like everybody has said, it's all about collaboration and what we can do to keep lifting each other up. And at the end of the day, the beer speaks for itself, and it'll quickly weed out if, the people in the industry that aren't meant to be sticking around long term.
No, great insight there. So we talked a lot about collaboration, cooperation. Morgan, got something to add?
Yeah. So just as you're speaking, it made me think about something. So I come from a social media background first before beer. And I really knew the marketing side and the strategy of just generally marketing companies. And it was something that really shifted in my co-founder, Amy. She worked at a brewery. And so she had that knowledge that came together as we built our company. And we realized that asking people, what are your competitors doing, was not the right question. And just making a shift to what are the benchmark brands doing. So that's like something when people are like, how do I get better on social media? That's one of the first things I ask them. Who are the people that you look to as a consumer and engage with? Not as a competitor. You're not like, I hate this brewery. It's like, I think they're doing something awesome. What can we learn from them? So now the question isn't what are your competitors doing? It's what are the people that are doing well doing that you can learn from? Who are those benchmark brands in the industry? And I think it just shifts the focus in such a positive way.
Morgan, I absolutely love that. And that's why I really enjoy these conversations with people who don't necessarily do the same thing in the industry, but have great minds. So you've kind of led me to a follow-up right now. Looking at brands outside of craft beer, what is a company or organization you believe we can learn from and why? And everybody else kind of start teeing up your ideas as well. So it's on your way.
Okay.
I mean, it could be just a company that has an amazing social media presence, a company that has these, 30-second TikToks that just reel you in every single time. What's someone outside of the space that you all think's doing a great job of staying relevant and engaging with their audience right now?
So I'm biased, but I'm going to say because I work with them, but I'm actually not the one creating the content that I'm going to speak to. But I'm happy to be part of the team. It's called Step Out Buffalo here in Buffalo. It's the biggest media company here. And I would say I've been working with them for a few years. But during the pandemic, I was extremely proud to be just associated with the company because the amount of resources they provided to local businesses for free, the amount of people that have come up to me, local business owners, and thanked me. I didn't create this specific content, but just the fact that they continued and provided that and weren't we have to get these sales. It was let's keep these businesses alive. And they're constantly putting out content that is free, helpful resources for businesses. It's one of the places I recommend breweries to read the blog from because it's that kind of content that you'll see at bigger companies, but 5 tips from Pete, who opened Lloyd Taco Factory in Buffalo, giving that insight into the real business owner's mind. And then they're also giving out content tips and tricks, stuff like that you can implement now. And guess what? Their business is improving. They have more clients than ever, and they've given more free content away, and it's not hurting them. So that would be who I would say is a good company to look to. And they balance educational and entertaining content very well. Some of it you won't really understand if you don't live in Buffalo, but it's those inside things that are a big deal in the city. And I think a lot of companies should bring that to their social media because people need to take a break and have a good time on social media. So I think that they're a really good benchmark brand to look to.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Who else has an idea of a brand that you really enjoy their presence or something they've done? Kyle.
I don't know if I have a specific brand, but I listen to Gary Vaynerchuk almost every morning, and what he talks about often is you need to post more, you need to give value, and again, give it away for free. Know your audience, know your backyard. In that terms of Buffalo there, but I think a lot of video, live video, the IGTV type stuff. But again, give more versus asking for things. And give it away for free. Just provide value and know who you're giving it to, and listen. Solicit feedback.
Yeah, he's a fantastic mind. I always enjoy listening to his content as well. I know all of you don't just talk to craft beer businesses all the time. So Jason, and PK, you're all great minds who look outside the box for inspiration. I know. So
yeah,
PK,
I got one, which I think Jason Sleeman may get a chuckle out of on the finance side. But one of my favorite brands has always been Chase, and the Chase banking company and their credit cards. And Chase Sapphire Reserve is probably one of my favorite brands, which I don't know if people know the backstory behind it, but they basically built a millennial cult following with Chase, and there are aspects of the card where you open it up, it's this metallic card, and they actually, if you look at their case study from Harvard Business School, they actually ran out of all of their year one cards within 2 weeks kind of thing, just based on how many people were interested in the referral bonuses, the actual points, the travel points, the conversions, things like that. And so one of the cool things that I've really admired from that entire aspect is that when I started the Fifth Ingredient, I went to Chase to get my business set up with them because the points would transfer over. Sorry, Jason, I see that.
I'll keep Jason on mute right now so he doesn't interrupt you. I know it's hard.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing where Jason goes with this one. But I think for me, the biggest aspect was that it shifted in my mindset the aspect of like referrals and building a cult of sorts, right? In a positive sense, not a negative sense, but in a positive sense of like the Beer 30 Legends, right? Where it transpired into saying like, how do we build that community of people that really transpired to just like help each other up and elevate? And I think that was where I got that a little bit from the Sapphire Reserve group. And the other one that I've been really following recently is MailChimp. And MailChimp was a very interesting one for people that know it from the newsletter side, Morgan probably all day. But they were a bootstrapped company that recently got acquired, right? And so what was super interesting about that aspect was the fact that they were just focused on growth, focused on profitability, focused on revenue, as opposed to necessarily getting external capital, external VC money, et cetera. And so it's also a really cool case study about building a company as opposed to, going down the traditional path, going the non-traditional path of bootstrapping and growth, which we've also really focused on in the Fifth Ingredient. So I think those are the brands that come to mind outside of the entire beer industry. Free for all. Morgan, feel free to disagree on MailChimp. Jason, feel free to disagree on Chase.
Jason, I guess we'll let you take the microphone right now.
No, it's it's interesting to watch how banking is. Banking's boring, so you got to figure out something. And I'm going to disclaimer mine that I talk about, and I'm going to say this is not where you should go necessarily for your brewery insurance. You should go see Kyle, but a good branding that I feel like has been as progressive and becoming your parents. Those are probably my favorite commercials right now about Dr. Rick trying to prevent them from being there. Like, I'll just sit there and I'm like, I chuckle, and I wish there was a lot more of that type of branding. We lose a lot of that, but it really doesn't say anything about who they are for insurance, but they're thinking, how do I take my 30 seconds and keep your attention? I'm sitting here talking about it right now, right? And so, that would be, that's a brand definitely to admire as you do that. I would love to figure out, how to bottle that kind of stuff for boring things like, banking. How do you do that, right? Because that's the secret of the sauce is how do you get people to remember you when it's the right time, and that's a brand that has definitely done that.
No, awesome example there, Jason. And Kyle, I think you could be Dr. Rick for Halloween, perhaps. That could be a good costume for you. And maybe recreate one of those little commercials, perhaps feature Jason Sleeman in that one.
I dress my daughters up as like Flo or something.
Yeah. No, quick cross branding. The Flo's not in those commercials, all right?
I know.
Well,
she can't enjoy a day at the beach.
Yeah, well, I gotta say that I don't like any of those, mostly because I don't talk about the product, and I'm not that agile on the marketing and the business promotion side anyway. So, but what I kind of identify with and what I like listening to is Neil deGrasse Tyson on his little podcast because he has a 18 minute kind of an interview, I guess, with his co-partner, who is a comedian. I can't remember his name right now, Chuck. And they take a topic and they talk about physics, and they explain why it affects you in everyday life. And it's trivial knowledge maybe to most, but that's kind of me. I like the little things, and that's kind of how I gravitate toward something like that, where they explain something that who gives a poop about, but then they explain why you should give a poop about it. And that's kind of what I liked. And I migrate toward some of those, I guess, types of podcasts. The commercials, I don't watch a whole lot of TV, so I don't, unless it's sports, but I don't get into those.
Jason, two things there. I absolutely love podcast commercials. I love how authentic they make you think they are and how it gets you excited to buy something you never needed. So that's complete random, but I like what you said about how Neil takes a topic that you don't think is relevant and makes it apply to your life. Because, look about how many different roles there are at a brewery. Morgan, I'm sure every now and then the brewer's like, oh, I don't care about social media, but I bet you can give them 100 reasons why it matters to them. And I think everybody here today, your topic might only initially seem relevant to someone in the brewery landscape, but at the end of the day, it matters to everyone, because what it takes is everyone in the ecosystem to come together to provide value in their unique way to go towards the big picture, and that's how you get success. And that's somewhat been the goal through Craft Beer Professionals, to bring all these different areas of interest together, because we just aggregate all this information in one community. We can learn so much together. So today's been fun. Like I mentioned when we first got here, everybody does something completely different in the space, yet somehow we could probably chat for 5 more hours, but we're going to end it right here. So Morgan, Jason, that's just fun, and Kyle and PK, this has been a really good time. I'm looking forward to having you all present at the upcoming conference. Thank you all for your support again. Looking forward to beers again in person before too long. So see everybody soon. Stay safe.
Appreciate it, Andrew. Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.